Pin is an oddity from the late 1980s about a young boy who latches onto a medical dummy to deal with the pressures of his home life. It's a concoction of character study and psychological horror with an unhealthy base of childhood trauma. Let's see if it lives up to its cult status. Welcome everyone to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Now what should I have you do before we start the podcast? How about you name the highest grossing slasher movies of the 80s, starting from 1988 backwards?
Why 88? Why not just say 89? This is the end of the decade. This is so flawed. Yes, I don't know. 1989 was a really bad year for slashers in terms of they all bombed. Like Halloween 5, Nightmare 5, and Friday 8 all underperformed. So it wasn't a good year for them.
No, it was not.
This is a horror movie podcast, everyone. We get together to talk about a horror movie. It's that simple. It is October, is the October dawn, and one of because we do a bunch of extra episodes in October, it's always nice to slide in something that's a little bit weirder, something that's a little off the beaten path. And that's normally the sort of thing we'll do in the bonus episodes over on Patreon or via YouTube memberships. You can support us, helps us out a bunch. You go check out all these other weird episodes. But I do think it's nice to squeeze the odd one, especially one that's got a bit of a cult status to it, into the main show. And that is why today we are looking at Pin from 1988. Oh, is that why you picked 88? Is it because that's the year this came out?
I was just trying to be difficult.
Just try to be eccentric. I gave you that out there that you could have took credit for and said, yes, that's why. See, don't question my genius. But you're too honest, Tim. You're a kind soul.
I prefer the chaos.
That's fair. I knew very little about this movie. I'd heard the title. I'd heard one or two different people from different podcasts say it was good. And that's it. That's all I knew. So it was kind of on my radar, on my to-do list for some time. And October-thon 2024 was it ended up being the date. It ended up being the time to get it done. So we're going to talk about it. We'll start spoiler-free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers. And, of course, if you are enjoying the show, please do hit the like button on YouTube. It helps us out a bunch. You can also get bonus content over at Patreon, like I mentioned before. But I'll tell you more about that at the end. So, what is Pin? What is the premise of Pin, you might ask? This is a tough one to say, because I really don't know how much I would consider a spoiler.
Sure.
I'll just say that there's a medical mannequin. You know, and when I say medical, by that I mean, it's this a mannequin used to teach people about the human body. So you can see like the organs and the muscles and whatnot. And it may or may not be alive, possibly, and creepy, and have an unhealthy relationship with the son of the doctor that owns it. And I think I'll just leave it there as far as like spoiler-free premise goes.
I think that sums it up.
Yeah, I'll leave it there. So yeah, I assume you hadn't seen this before either.
No, similar to you, I had heard about it, which, it's not one that you hear about a lot. Like, sometimes people say like, oh, this movie's a cult classic or whatever. And it's like, well, I mean, I've heard lots of people talk about it. Like, I would say this is definitely like a cult favorite. Like, I would say it's not something I hear about a ton, but, like you were saying, like I've heard some people mention it on podcasts and stuff. And it is definitely does seem like one of those ones where the people that have seen it, whenever they mention it, it's like, let me tell you about Pin. It's a fun one to talk about. But I also had this on my radar. It's something I've been meaning to get to for a while. Yeah,
I'm glad we got to squeeze it in then. There's a couple of familiar faces in this, actually. The dad of the family is played by Terry O'Quinn, who you may know from Lost, probably primarily, but other things as well. Tim, I'm sure, wants to jump in and yell "Silver Bullet" at me.
Of course, Silver Bullet is great, and I mean, he's a titular stepfather in the Stepfather series, so we consider him horror royalty.
Yeah, we've not done the Stepfather on the show. I have seen the Stepfather, but
yeah. Have you seen all 3 Stepfathers?
No, I've only seen the original.
I want to say it's 3 Terry O'Quinn ones, and then there might have been like a remake or something.
I knew there was at least one sequel. I just assumed he wasn't in the sequel. I assumed it was like that we've got a new cast. It's cheaper. It's nastier. It's.
I might be wrong, but I think he's at least in the second one. I forget if he's in the third one.
Okay. Interesting. The one that got me off guard with this is the main character, the son, Leon.
Leon S. Kennedy.
Not that Leon. It's played by David Hewlett, and I recognize that name. And when the movie starts, it starts when they're kids, and then it jumps them up in age till they're like adolescents, and then it jumps them up in age until they're like sort of in their late teens. And that's where it switches to David Hewlett, who plays the character for the rest of the movie. And he looks so different here because he's so young. But I there was just like a moment, a few scenes into his part of the movie, where I went, wait a minute, this is the guy from Cube. I know this guy's face.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he's in Cube. Some Stargate fans will know him from Stargate. I want to say Atlantis, maybe, is the one he's in. But he's, like it's someone I recognized. I was like, oh, I know this dude.
Good eye. And of course, if people are wondering, like, well, how the heck was he in Cube? It's like, well, this is a Canadian film, so.
I mean, yeah. I don't know if anyone was wondering that, though, but this is Canadian. That is correct. Very good. Terry O'Quinn's not a Canadian, though. It's not like everyone in the movie's Canadian.
The ones that matter are Canadian.
Terry O'Quinn doesn't matter? What is this nonsense?
I mean, he's your heavy hitter. Like, of course, you got to bring in a Yank to round out the cast. And I'm pretty sure... Yeah. And I want to say Pin might have been Norwegian, but I'm not entirely sure.
Do you mean the voice of Pin? Because I think you're very confused otherwise, Tim. Do you mean Norwegian plastic? I don't know if Norwegians are known for making plastic, but...
they're big on plastics.
In fact, one of the alternate titles for this is Pin, a Plastic Nightmare.
Yeah.
Just thought it was worth mentioning.
I kept wondering, like, if they're going to reveal if Pin stands for something... I don't know if I missed something.
But... Oh, no, they did reveal later on why he's called Pin. That did come up.
Oh, okay. All right, yeah. You'll have to remind me then.
I will. Yes.
Okay.
But yeah, it didn't stand for... It wasn't an acronym. I'll just say that.
Okay, gotcha.
I'll give you that much right now. The other sort of main character would be the sister, Ursula, played by Cynthia Preston, although she was credited as Cindy Preston in the movie. Cindy with a Y. Well, Cindy always has a Y, but Cindy with 2 Ys, I guess, specifically.
Oh, Sydney, what are you doing? Leave some Ys for the rest of us.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it always ends in a Y, but I mean, the I was replaced with a Y. That's what I was getting at.
There's some people that end with IE.
Aye, freaks. Like, what? Who are these Cindy's ending with an IE? Or worse, ones that just end with an I, like some sort of like, oh, we're artsy. We just have an I at the end.
I mean, when you have kids and then you go to school and you meet the kids there, the absolute abomination on some of the spellings that parents choose.
Like, there's one that's a pet peeve of mine, which is silly because I know it's like a French version of the word, but like I hate when I see Amy spelled with an I at the end. It's just like it triggers me in a way that it shouldn't. But I'm like, it looks better with a Y. You've made the word look bad. Why have you done that?
I mean, you would be shocked at how many ways I've seen Jackson spelled. Tell me there's one with an X in the middle. Oh, of course. I mean, that's
okay.
That's not even like the weirdest by far that we've seen.
Oh no. So yeah. Yeah, Cynthia Preston, I was like, she looks vaguely familiar, and I looked up her like credits, and she's been doing stuff like up until now. She's been in TV shows left and right, some of them quite modern. But when I look back sort of this era to see if she'd done anything around this time, I didn't know there was a Prom Night 3. I only thought there was a 2. So she's in Prom Night 3, so that's a thing.
Yeah.
She's in an episode or 2 episodes of the Friday the 13th TV series. So,
Oh, okay.
needless to say, not a career with a lot of big titles, but a lot of roles. So, who knows? We might see her on a future bonus episode somewhere.
Huzzah.
She was in a TV show called Matrix. Not The Matrix, just Matrix. But yeah. So yeah, very strange. Oh, the episode of X-Files. There you go. That's a more famous
the truth is out there.
Yeah. Episode of Relic Hunter. Anyone remember Relic Hunter? I never watched that. I just remember the ads for it.
That's totally lost on me. I remember the movie Relic.
No, it was Tia Carrera and kind of like an Indiana Jones style TV show. And I believe it was Canadian, so I've got a funny feeling Cynthia Preston here might be a Canuck.
That would make sense. Was that around the time of Tomb Raider, or?
I guess the early one. It was right in that sort of mid to late 90s kind of era. So yeah, I guess during that first, it was on the same time as like Xena and all that kind of stuff.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Yeah.
Of that ilk, I guess I would call it. But yeah, okay. Well, there's that. Director again directed a bunch of stuff, although I would not have recognized a single thing on this list other than Pin. Has more writing credits even than that. Wrote the original Amityville Horror, for example. But
I think I saw that on a poster or something from the writer of. All right.
But that's pretty much it. So it's Terry O'Quinn's definitely the. To be fair, David Hewlett as well. He's a bit of a cult actor, but those are definitely the bigger names that are more recognizable from this. But yeah, all right. Well, there you go. I suppose we'll get to the basic question. Tim.
Yes.
How did you feel about Pin?
I mean, what do you say about a movie like Pin? Yeah, I mean, honestly, sometimes you hear about these movies, and you get really excited, and then they just don't really live up to the hype. But I think this is one that absolutely, felt like it was worth the, I guess. I don't know if I want to say accolades, but the
that's a big word for a movie. Yeah. We heard a few people on podcasts say it was kind of cool.
Yeah, but I can definitely see why this is like a movie that people get excited about when you're like, oh my god, you saw this. It's obviously we're dealing with something that is it's kind of weird because like I don't think this really is like. I don't know if it's like in that category of like, oh, it's like so bad that it's good, because I don't know, like I didn't find like the performers or anything to be like terrible, and like I wouldn't say that it had some of the staples of like the cheesiness or whatever of other kind of movies that run that gamut that are like, oh my god, yeah, this is so outrageous or over the top or whatever. It's a bit more subdued, but there is just like a weirdness and a sleaziness to it that does make it like very shocking.
I mean, I do think Hewlett does kind of chew the scenery a little bit at times, but it's in a weird, interesting place where it's not really so bad it's good, and it's not it's genuinely good in a lot of ways, but at the same time, some of the way it handles like the material at times it does kind of fall into that territory, but at the very least it's always captivating. It's always interesting.
Right? Yeah, I can't say I was bored by it, by any means. Maybe a little bit of a complaint, but not really the movie's fault. But at least as of when we're recording this, it's not streaming anywhere, so I did have to watch kind of a. I don't know if I want to say crappy, but like just an okay version on YouTube. So, it would have been nice if maybe it was a bit clearer, or some of the dialogue and stuff was a bit easier to make out. But it's not like it was hard to watch or anything. But again, that's more just a complaint about the availability of the movie, not the movie itself. But. I was into it, and I have a lot of questions. I think it's definitely an interesting movie that we'll have a lot to talk about. I'm not even sure if I understand maybe necessarily everything. I definitely have some questions, but yeah, I think this is one that I would recommend for people that like stuff that's weirder, off the beaten path, and again that feels very sleazy. And it's not like, I say that it's not like very exploitive or anything. Like, it's not like there's tons of nudity or whatever. Like, it's not sleazy in that way, but I guess just some of the things that they're dealing with just makes it feel like, I don't know, just kind of a weird icky movie in a way.
Well, the main character is definitely sexually repressed. There's definitely,
absolutely,
it's a big theme in the movie, for sure. I'll just for the record though, if you're in the UK, it is on Shudder, so it's actually quite easy.
Oh, nice, yeah.
Watch on the UK, but there is a Blu-ray you can track down if you're still doing the physical media dance. You can go find that. Yeah, the dance.
I'll always be at the dance.
Well, until they just don't sell them anymore.
Not gonna happen. Not as long as I'm around.
It becomes like N64 cartridges where it's all just the used market, and discs are going for $200 and all sorts.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, I will be a very rich man.
I liked it. I think pretty quickly it's like, okay, here's this weird premise. You're like, okay, is this doing a real thing? Is it all in someone's head? Is it supernatural? Is it psychological? And the movie does sort of slowly kind of answer that as it goes on. It's not even like a big thing at the end where it's like, oh, and there's the answer. No, I'd say by halfway through, you've got a pretty solid understanding of like, okay, what it is. But there's definitely a learning process in that first like half hour where it's like, oh, this is weird. It's doing weird things, and it's got lots of memorable scenes, and the characters are kind of quirky, and well, the main character is at the very least, and it just it has this kind of like stilted quality to it that makes it very, very engrossing in a way that I just like. I was never, so an hour 45. I never really felt that runtime at all. I was too busy being just kind of captivated by like, okay, what's this main guy Leon going to do? And like, I don't know, just there's a lot of interesting stuff. And it's not a movie with like a body count or anything like that. It's not that type of horror movie, but it absolutely just the Pin himself, because that's the name of the mannequin, is kind of creepy, and the voice that you hear when it's talking is kind of creepy. But from there, it's more about like how it'll influence things, and how it's more this kind of like almost devil on the shoulder of the main character. But we'll get into more of like how it all works in the spoilers. But needless to say, I was entertained, and it definitely lived up to the phrase "it is a cult movie." And I'm like, you know what? Yes, that's exactly what it is. I could totally see that, and I would recommend it for anyone wanting something a little bit different and a little bit, just there's a little bit of shock value, just a little bit, not like super shocking, just a little bit of like, oh, that's a bit taboo. They just did that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. In some ways, it reminds me. This isn't like a great example, but I don't know. I see like some similarities with something like The Pit, which I think that definitely is way more outrageous and over the top, but
also Canadian, funnily enough.
Yeah, maybe that's why I'm seeing some of the similarities. But just kind of the idea of like having like, I don't know, this dweeby little kid, and then like having this kind of inanimate object that you're kind of wondering like, is it alive? Is it not? I don't know. That was one of the first movies that kind of jumped to my mind.
I suppose the other thing there is that the kid in The Pit is also like a lot of the movies about his attitude towards sex, and this movie's very much about the main character's attitude towards sex. So yeah, there's definitely some thematic overlap, even though they're very different. And like the kid in The Pit is more kind of like diabolically evil in some of the things that he does.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I'm not going to say the character in this is grounded, but it's at least based on something that's a bit more grounded.
Oh sure, yeah, and it feels like the kid in The Pit, like, I don't know, I'm sorry, dude, but that character just like sucks. Like you said, he's like evil. But I feel like, I mean, not that he didn't have, his setbacks, or not like life was the easiest for him or whatever. But I mean, it seems like this kid, a lot of it has to do like with his upbringing and his parents, and
yes,
he probably could have used maybe some therapy or something, maybe some medication at some point to help with some of the stuff he went through.
Well, yeah, one of the things you see in the movie is that there is a point where Terry O'Quinn kind of realizes, oh no, what have we done to this kid? Oh no,
Yeah.
we've made a huge mistake, and you know, we're going to reap the rewards potentially. So, yeah, okay. I mean, as far as anything else goes, I mean, if I was to throw a negative at it, I will say the music sounds like it's out of a stock library. It sounds like they just got cheap music out of a library somewhere, and it makes it sound like some sort of direct-to-TV movie, which it isn't, but the music sounds like something that you'd hear in a direct-to-TV movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's not memorable.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a minor quibble, all things considered, because if everything else is entertaining, then it's fine, but worth mentioning. So, yeah, honestly, I just want to say spoilers and get into it, because that's where the real meat of this is actually talking about what's going on. So, spoilers for Pin, you have been warned. So, the movie opens with like a little tease of like, there's like these kids who are like outside what turns out to be like the main family house, and they're like, hey, who's that up at the window? And they're like, oh, is it a thing? Is it like is it a mannequin? Is it some sort of person? It's like, no, but they'd been moving. Is it someone who's paralyzed? No, because they'd be moving too. You know, their head would be moving at least. So a kid climbs up, and we don't see whoever it is. We just see like kind of a close up of an eye, and we hear a voice say, "Get away" or something like that. And the kids get scared and they run away. And it's just a little tease. It's a little like tease of. It ends up being a tease of the ending. Actually, this is clearly set after the rest of the story. So you know, more on that later. But like, it's just a little tease to set the mood before we introduce ourselves to the main characters, which is a bit more layered in that it's like, okay, we have these two children, a brother and sister. Brother's maybe a year or two older than the sister. They are maybe like, I don't know, 8 and 6 in this first scene, something like that. 7 and 5 maybe.
Yeah. The only like kind of clue I have is that I think when they're doing like their pre-nighttime ritual that Terry O'Quinn refers to the daughter as not being in school yet.
So she was probably like maybe just under 5. Yeah. Okay.
4 or 5, yeah.
All right, okay, that makes a bit more sense. But yeah, we see that they stand in these little stools to eat their like late supper or whatever it is. And then like as soon as they walk away from where they were eating, like the Hoover comes in and the mum's cleaning from where they were standing, and so it already tells you, oh, this woman's neurotic. This woman is like a clean freak. She has to be clean all the time. If there's been anything being consumed, it has to be cleaned right after, so that there's no crumbs, there's no nothing. Even though it didn't look what they were eating was even crummy, it just looked like, you know, whatever. But so okay, gives you a sense of who she is, and then immediately we meet the dad, played by Terry O'Quinn, who is like very intensely just like watching like a concert or something on TV, but as soon as the kids show up at the door, like he closes the little doors on the cabinet and is like, I wouldn't say he's stern, but he's very cold. Like it definitely feels like this is not like a normal household where the parents are like heartwarming with their children, because he's just kind of, he's like a drill sergeant almost, where he's like, all right, what shall I have you two do before bed? All right, daughter, count backwards from 10.
Yeah, which that was my joke at the beginning of the episode.
Yes, that's what Tim was referring to.
So yeah, and I think they do a good job of like portraying that coldness, that sterility, because you know it's very easy to go over the top and like have him just be like this screaming abusive guy, or like the mom being like, you know, some drunk or whatever. But it's not that. But you can still tell like with the way they act that, like, yeah, you know, that this isn't like a very warm, loving environment, that is something that can equally mess the kids up, just, you know, from them being repressed and just having like these feelings of coldness and ambivalence, you know, to their parents, and just being kept on such a short leash and feeling like they have to like constantly be perfect and stuff. Like, you know, that can be just as bad as if, you know, they were like over the top and yelling and screaming or something.
Yeah, you say that, but I bet before bedtime tonight you're like, all right, Wyatt, count backwards from 10.
Of course.
You're taking notes. Okay, this is great parenting stuff. This is so many hints and tips. Got so many ideas for the future. No, I agree. It does a good job of like portraying, because it'd be so easy to just have him be like slapping them about or whatever, or doing something super extreme. But instead, it's like, no, they're not evil. They're just really cold and repressed, and don't really give the kids a chance to feel like kids. They feel like they're like under lock and key the entire time, and
which is why they might glom on to, let's say, a medical anatomy dummy.
Yes,
for attention.
Yeah, because so the daughter does the counting backwards perfectly fine, and then the son, pardon me, Leon is told counting backwards from 100, but in sevens. So he's like, okay, 100, 93, and he keeps going, and he messes up. He gets to like 60 something, and he gets it one off, and he's like, nope, that's not quite right. Work on it for tomorrow, and we'll try again. And I'm like, all right, that's such a weird specific math problem to give him, but all right.
Yeah.
But it sets this up, and it's like, and obviously during these couple of scenes, I'm like, okay, we're getting to know the family. I'm getting a sense of what their home life's like, but I don't really know. Like, I mean, I don't really know what the premise of the movie is yet. I know the opening scene kind of teased someone mannequin like sitting at a window, but it wasn't until we get a scene at the doctor's office. So the dad's a doctor, right? Terry O'Quinn's the doctor, and bizarrely, his kids are sitting there whilst he's seeing a patient. Though they're in his doctor's office, which was already kind of a weird and quirky thing to begin with. But he's speaking to as a kid, right? He's seen a kid, and he basically does this thing where he says, what do you think, Pin? And sure enough, this medical dummy's sitting over on the other side of the room, and we hear a voice. And I'm like, wait, what's happening? Why is there just a dummy that's speaking? And what's so funny about it is that later on, obviously, we find out that like when the son's talking to him, he's without realizing it, he's doing ventriloquism, right? So I think the implication is that the dad just did this as a fun thing to try and make the children patients a bit more comfortable. Like, hey, there's a dummy, and he can do a little bit of ventriloquism, and it'll put them at ease or whatever. Which feels really like this is the opposite of how he is at home. Like he's doing ventriloquism at the doctor's office to help kids feel better, but at home he's like, all right, attention, count backwards to 10, you little shits. So it's very interesting, but honestly, because I didn't know what the premise of this movie was, when this scene started going down this path of like talking to the dummy, I was like, wait, is this just a thing in this movie that no one's ever going to act as if it's weird? Did they just have a dummy that's got a mind of its own and can talk, and we're just never going to address it? And that's not what happens eventually. It is referred to as a dummy. It is referred to as unhealthy, that someone's talking to it all the time, and so on. But at first I was like, the way he's just sort of playing this casually, the dad that is, I was like, is this what this movie is? They just have a dummy that speaks, and we never and it isn't, but for a second I really thought it was.
I feel like I questioned it for so long in the movie, because even like you said, like the characters really don't pay like any mind to it. They're acting like it's just normal, and I do feel like it is kind of a while before someone is like, oh no, like it's a dummy, like what are you doing? But yeah, it's also funny because like you're saying, like, the doctor is trying to do this as like this fun thing or whatever, but the voice is still like really creepy, and especially coming from like this doll, which already looks kind of creepy. Like it's not like it's a fun little puppet that they put in there for kids. It's like, I don't know, it's a very disturbing looking thing.
Yeah, it's obviously got no skin because it's a medical thing, so it's whatever. But then there's this bit afterwards where like it kind of suggests that the dad also maybe had a problem. Maybe it wasn't as bad as what his sons would turn out to be, because there's a moment where the two kids are told to go out into the waiting room and wait out there, which is where they should have been anyway, to be honest, given what's going on here. But like the dad starts talking to Pin once they leave the room, but the son sort of stands at the door and listens when he's not supposed to. But the dad's talking to Pin saying, hey, yeah, that kid, like the lung, it could be something. It may not just be like a normal thing. I'll have to do some x-rays and hope for the best. And then he notices his son's listening to him, and he gets angry and tells him to go. And I was like, okay. And this was the sort of thing where I was like, wait, is it just really alive? Is this just a thing? What's going on?
Yeah. I definitely like felt like I was going back and forth throughout the movie. Like by the end, it's more clear. But as I was watching, I was like, huh, okay. Like, yeah, maybe this is just a thing.
Yeah, it's just it plays it kind of close to the chest enough where you're like, obviously the normal thing would be that it's just all in someone's head and it's not really alive, but you just don't know how weird the movie is going to be. Like, the movie might just be weird and just have it happen.
Yeah, no, totally.
So yeah,
and I think I kept waiting too for like a twist where it would be like, oh, you know, you think that it's fake, but then it really does move or something. Like, I kept thinking that's when like the horror was going to kick in.
So yeah, there's a whole thing here where, like, that night, or maybe it's the next day or whatever, but like, young Leon wants to come in and talk to Pin, right? Because we see that they get like the girl gets like a birthday gift or something, or maybe that's actually after the time jump. I can't remember, but he wants to talk to Pin about something here. I don't even remember what it was, but he wants to talk to Pin, and he's hiding out in his dad's doctor's office at the end of the day. But he hears the nurses saying, "Oh, I'm leaving now. I just need to clean up in the doctor's office. I left a bit of a mess." So Leon hides behind the curtain in the corner, right? It's one of those, like, privacy curtains, and he hides there. And the nurse comes in because he's not supposed to be here, so that he's hiding. The nurse is like cleaning up the stuff that's on the tray and stuff, and she's like assembling things. And then halfway through the scene, she just sort of looks over at Pin and gets this look in her eye, and I'm like, oh no, where's this movie going? This because I would say obviously it's kind of weird up until this point, but this is the point of the movie where I'm like, oh no, we're doing sex stuff. We're doing like how this kid views sex, and what part of the reason for it is that one of his formative memories is going to be watching this nun masturbate with a medical dummy. Nurse, yeah. We just did immaculate like a few days ago. But nuns on the brain.
Yeah. This scene is wild. Like I was already like, into the movie at this point, like, but I mean, this is where I was like, okay, buckle up, like, we're going places here. It's so bizarre because like it's not like, I don't know, this was just like a very well made, realistic looking mannequin. Again, it's like, you see all the skin and meat and stuff on him. Like, I don't.
There's no skin. That's the point. It's just like muscle. Oh, yeah.
It's like see-through skin. Yeah. And I don't know. There's got to be like anything else you can use.
This woman, because this came out in 1988. This woman, the previous year. Well, actually, maybe this scene isn't 1988 because all these time jumps. I think the present, like when we get to them as adults, it's 1988. But whatever. Yeah, forget that for a minute, right? This woman saw Hellraiser the year before and went, oh, something about that evil Frank with no skin really did it for me. Right? She was all into it. She was the pleasures of the flesh. She was all about it. Yeah, how'd you go?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, I mean, in this case, not much flesh, but...
No.
Yeah, but I mean, I love that, this is such a trope with these type of movies where it's like, yeah, a little kid sees like sex way too early, and that just like there's no coming back from that.
Yeah, sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's Santa Claus. Like but it happens. Yeah, I mean the way the scene plays out as well is that she looks over and she says something to him, and that's kind of like, and I think that's partly what confuses the idea. Like, wait, do other people talk to Pin? Does the nurse also talk to him? Like, and obviously she doesn't really. She's just sort of saying like a one-sided conversation as if she's just sort of playing around. But she's like, oh, hey, Pin, how are you? And she walks over and she's looking at him with this eye, and then you just see her sort of lift up like her skirt at the bottom. You see the skirt come up out of frame, and it's like, what is she like? Is she just joking around? And I'm like, yeah. But then of course she lifts him up, takes him over to the medical table, gets on top, and she just holds him on top and starts like moving him up and down. And all I could think was, is she just like rubbing his leg against her crotch, or are they suggesting here that he actually has a penis that is penetrating, shall we say?
with maybe some type of on-off switch to.
Well, because the thing, like, there's a scene that comes in a couple of scenes time that does imply that he does have a penis, but I have to imagine a medical dummy would not have an erect penis.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I'd be shocked if it did. That'd be very strange.
You know, to be fair, I don't even know if we, like, do we ever even see Pin's full body? I feel like it's almost always like mostly the head, and then like, you know, sometimes like from the chest up.
You see, I mean, you kind of see his full body from the side where you see like his legs. Yeah. He's in like kind of a sitting pose. You see like people pick him up occasionally, so
yeah,
you do a bit. But yeah, you never see his crotch, and I'm fine with that. I didn't need to see it, but
I was curious.
It was just like the thought popped out of my head. I'm like, wait a minute, like, does he actually have the bit that you're using here, or are you just kind of grinding on him? Like, what? What's exactly happening here? But of course, the point of the scene is that young Leon's like behind the curtain watching it in shock and awe.
And just man, imagine that poor actress like. Filming that day, like just imagining her being like, all right, so what's my motivation? Like,
you're a horny bitch, that's your motivation.
And you gotta assume like this wasn't the first time that she's done this, like, you know,
oh, the character, I think even the actress. I'm like, whoa, what an accusation, Tim.
Oh, the character, because it's not like she looks at Pin and is like, hey, there's a first time for everything. You know, she looks at him like,
oh, remember that night we had together beside the fireplace? Oh, let's go for one more round, Pin, my boy.
Mean, she has the need, you know?
The need. Oh, yeah, we'll talk about the need. So, yeah, I mean, this basically gives us our first time jump after this. And then, yeah, I think this is where it's like the sister's birthday and she's getting a present. One of which the dad even says is from Pin, which does feel very unhealthy that he's like, what, especially in hindsight when you look back on it, is, oh, it was never real, and the dad maybe was just a little unhealthy with how he talked about Pin and how he presented Pin. Like, it's like, damn, the fact that you were sort of pushing this onto your kids, it was really dangerous, as we will later find out. But yeah, like, young, and to be fair, I want to say they did a great job casting the different ages of these characters, because it was always very clear that the boy and the girl, like, maybe not so much in this scene it would be obvious because they're with the parents, but when they age them up again to teenagers and we're in high school, we see a bunch of teenagers before it cuts to one of them, but as soon as it cuts to Leon, you know it's him. You're like, that's absolutely Leon. There's no mistaking it, despite the fact that it's a different actor. So yeah, credit where credit's due. If anything, there's even a couple of moments where he looks a little bit like Terry O'Quinn. So they kind of struck this perfect balance of, like, you look the older version of the kid actor, but you also look a younger version of Terry O'Quinn. So thumbs up.
Yeah,
on all fronts.
And yeah, and surprisingly, you know, I didn't think like the, you know, it's always a mixed bag sometimes with children actors, but I actually thought the kids, you know, gave a pretty good performance. Yeah, like. Yeah, I didn't find them to be like really that bad of actors. People might disagree with me, but there was, I forget which scene it was, but I did think there was one scene where I mixed up the Ursula's boyfriend later on with Leon.
That's confusing.
And yeah, and I don't know if again, maybe just the version I was watching, maybe the picture was like a little crappier or something. But at one point, I thought they were gonna go like down a more incesty kind of road.
I do think there's maybe, given how he acts whenever his sister's involved with someone, I do think there's maybe an implication that he does have a bit of a weird incestuous, protective kind of thing going on. They never really go down that path completely, though, which I'm totally fine with. But
I mean, hey, just listen to some of his poetry, and you're like,
it sounds pretty rough. Yeah, which, and a lot of this sexual stuff obviously starts from around this part of the movie when they're now, I mean, what are they now, like, I don't know, 9 and 11, 10 and 12, something like that.
Probably, yeah.
Something in that range. Because we get this scene here where after they've had this little birthday dinner or whatever, the two kids are in his bedroom, right? And they're just lying in the bed, and she's reading the magazine. And quite quickly, she says, whoa, look at these. And then you get a shot of the magazine, and it's like a topless woman. and like they have this really weird like kid conversation about tits where she's like, whoa, do you think I'm going to look like that? Do you think mom looks like that? Oh, my friend, Sally, she's already starting growing boobs, which actually led to one of my favorite lines of the whole movie, where Leon says, that isn't breasts, that's fat. I don't know, I thought that was funny. he's just been a little shit. But actually, at one point in this scene, he brings up Pin, and I can't remember the exact line she says, but she says something about, oh, he's just a dummy or something like that. And this is your sign that Leon's not very healthy, because Leon just slaps her across the face, right? And I'm like, oh man, like that just sort of struck out of nowhere, and immediately you sort of get the vibe, like, okay, we're doing a character who's unwell. We're going to be doing the crazy obsessed brother character, a little bit of Norman Bates in him, kind of thing.
Oh sure.
But yeah, so of course when the mum comes to the door and she catches them with the magazine and she clearly is disapproving of it, it's like, okay, we get that they're repressed. There's also actually some of the dialogue in this scene is they're talking about like how actually no, it's after the next scene, because yeah, like the next scene is where they're back at the medical office, and again the dad, being really unhealthy, has brought them to Pin because he's using Pin as a surrogate to teach them about the birds and the bees, and talks about sexual intercourse and making babies, but specifically this idea, and this was the part that really got me, is he said, just like you get thirsty for water, sometimes you get thirsty for sex. That's you get right. The needs. And I'm like, I mean, he's right, but it seems a bit blunt to be saying it that way to these kids. And it leads to a conversation with the two kids when they're in the back garden in the next scene, where they're discussing the need. And like, oh, do mom and dad get the need? And Leon's like, well, they must do, because we're here. And then they start like, they say a couple of things that I would never say that about my parents at any age. Like I can't imagine thinking about it, because they make a joke about like their bits or whatever. But at one point, and this is what sort of leads us into like the next time jump, Ursula just sort of hits out with, because she asks him like, hey, do you ever have the need? Because he's a little bit older. He's like, yeah, nah, not really. I'm not old enough yet. Mm-hmm. And then she goes, I think I'll like it. I think I'm going to be good at it. I can't wait until I've got the need. Smash cut to another 5 years later, whatever. She's 15 now, because they specifically say that for this part of the timeline, which I assume means he's about 17, right? I think he's like getting ready to apply to college, so that sounds about right. And when we get to this part of the movie, we see that he's dressing like his dad. He's got like the sort of sweater vest on and the tie. He looks like a preppy little douchebag. And it's David Hewlett now who's playing the character. It was so weird. There's a school dance going on, and he sees like graffiti on his locker saying, "Oh, if you want a guaranteed lay, call Ursula," right? And this upsets him, and he goes looking for her in the dance, and he can't find her. It's a little
wordy for a locker.
It is, yeah. That's Canadian graffiti is a bit more intricate, Tim. You dumb Americans don't know how to do proper graffiti, okay? But he goes looking for her, and he ends up finding her outside in a car with some other student, and they're having sex, right? And because of the implication before he got to the car, I was like, okay, the implication is as ridiculous as this sounds, her at 10 or whatever age she was saying, I think I'm going to be into sex. I can't wait to start doing that. Cut to 15, which is still very much underage, but definitely that time where you're thinking about it a lot more. I was like, okay, she's going to be like a complete, like, sort of slutty character because she loves sex, and that's going to bother him because he's so, like, basically they've both had the opposite reaction to how their parents have treated them. He is like ultra repressed, where she is kind of like going the opposite direction, where she's sort of like, she's been drawn towards the sex. She's been drawn towards the taboo because her parents tried to conceal it from her, right? They've had completely opposite reactions to it. But what got me, though, is that, well, they do say that she's been having sex with multiple people and that she's very active. See, when we actually get to meet her and she comes out the car, I'm like, she looks like she's got the sort of the summery dress on. She's got her hair done up like a sort of church girl. Like she doesn't like have the personality of that type of character at all. She seems like just sort of the innocent girl next door. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to be fair, like, you know, I feel like we don't see things from her point of view. Like,
That's true. That's fair. Yeah.
there was just some graffiti on our locker. Like, you know, maybe she slept like with one person or something, but then, you know, this probably, especially at that time, like things could have gotten out of hand or whatever. But yeah, it does seem like she has a healthier attitude about it. Like, you probably, you know, you should have used more protection and whatnot. But yeah, I like that it never becomes like, oh yeah, that's the only thing that defines her. Like, she's still like a very, like, you know, well-rounded character.
Yeah, that's the weird thing, is that she's actually a lot more like, she isn't just that as the movie goes on. Like, when especially when we age everyone up again, she feels a lot different, and she feels like, I don't know, she actually just seems like a nice enough normal person. But I think it is put through that lens of like the panic that Leon has after he reads that locker message and then he can't find her. It gives the impression that he's worried, oh, she's having sex with someone again. Like, that's the vibe that it gives you.
Oh, sure, yeah. And then I don't know if you remember, but when he's like beating the shit out of that guy, I feel like he kept saying something over and over again.
Oh no, I don't remember.
Okay, yeah, I forget what it was. Like, I don't want to say.
Yeah, we actually didn't mention that. He pulls the guy out of the car and starts kicking the shit out of him. Just for context.
Yeah, like, I want to say like something like, what was it, like, not again, or not this time?
Yeah,
or
something like that. Yeah. And then he's like, hey, you got to promise me you'll never do this again. I won't have a sister for a tramp, which you could sort of see him kind of becoming a worse version of his father, where he's even more repressed and he's even more controlling, and he's like, no, you will not be this. I will not have a sister that is like this. And he's super controlling about it. And it turns out that she did makes a promise not to sleep around, but she turns out to be pregnant, and he's like, you promised. And she's like, no. I've not had my period in 2 months. This predates the promise. So it does kind of suggest that she was at least active. I mean, again, how many people she was having sex with is whatever. Maybe it does seem inflated because we're getting it through the lens of the brother character who's paranoid. But she's like, yeah, you know, what do we do? Like, I don't want to tell Dad. And he's like, we're in a small town. There's like 5 doctors. He's going to find out. Like even if you go to another doctor, he's going to find out. So smash cut from there. And this movie does this a lot, where it really neatly like goes into the next scene, and it keeps it kind of exciting, because it doesn't like, because some movies would have had several scenes of her agonizing over this decision, you know, another scene in the house where she's like breaking down in tears, another scene where she's like almost mentioning it and then can't quite bring it out. No, we smash cut to the doctor's office, and the dad's like, you know, putting on his scrubs, getting ready to like, you know, help her with the abortion or whatever. But he specifically says, hey, as far as your mother's concerned, this is just some menstrual problems. Like, she doesn't need to know this. But he clearly is, you know, saddened by it. He clearly is disappointed, because he says something like, oh, you know, I went through the effort. I mean, I had Penn tell you about sex, so you'd have more knowledge than I did at your age. And where's it led me? It's led me to a Sunday in the office, you know. So it's very dismissive. It's very whatever. So yeah, I mean,
Preston didn't have Penn perform the abortion.
I think, hey, say what you want, but that nurse that Penn had sex with, she's not pregnant, right? That was safe sex.
That's true.
Right? Don't get much safer than plastic.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not true, but I mean, as long as it's clean. I mean, bacteria is a thing. I mean, I suppose you have to be concerned with such
you want to
things.
spray it down after each use.
Yeah, for sure.
Other than that.
For sure. Well, you think Penn's been passed around? Like all the nurses?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like, if nothing else, this movie definitely is about like these 2 kids that have been gravely like impacted by how their parents treat them, and also treat the subject of sex around them. So but that's pretty much this you know, part of the movie. From here, we find out that Leon's supposed to be applying to colleges, but he doesn't want to leave. And the dad kind of suspects that it's because he doesn't want to leave Penn. He wants to stay around Penn. I think there's a moment here as well where, I think it's before the abortion scene, actually. It doesn't cut straight to that. I apologize. There was one scene in between where Leon takes Ursula to Penn and says, let's go get advice from Penn. Because this is
right, yeah.
this is the scene where she notices that he's doing ventriloquism. She looks at his mouth and can tell that he's the one doing the voice. And outside the building, she's like, "Hey, when did you let her do that?" And he's like, "Let her do what?" He has no idea. So there is one scene in between there that leads to the abortion scene. But yeah, so he doesn't want to leave town. He wants to stay where Pin is. He's like reliant on Pin. It's this crutch that he has emotionally to go to Pin for advice. It's the one friend that will never betray him, right? It's the one, it's a father who'll never be disappointed in him, kind of thing. Which leads us to how the parents die, which is not an intentional thing. It's actually a complete accident. But basically, the dad and the mom are going to some medical conference or something like that. But he forgets something at his office, so he goes back for it. And when he goes back, he catches Leon talking to Pin and having a full-on conversation and realizing, shit, I've made a huge mistake. My son is like unhealthily relying on this thing. And whether or not the dad had some sort of like problems with being reliant on it, like he can tell that this is a problem for his son. And that he's taking Pin away. He takes Pin into the car. The mum doesn't like it being there, but he's like, no, I'm taking it with us. I'm going to use it for a demonstration. And then we're leaving it at the medical building. The students can use it or something, right? We're getting Pin out of our lives. That's it. But he's so tense as he's like angry about this and he's driving that he ends up like driving like off road and the car flips and both of them die. I guess the one sort of creepy thing about this scene though is that because of the car swerving, the sheet on Pin like falls off and then he kind of sits upright, but it's just because the car's, you know, turning a certain way and whatever else, and even falls forward right before the crash. So it does give it this kind of vibe. Like, if you're still trying to like have the audience think that, oh, is there something supernatural? Is there something going on with Pin? There's just enough there to make you think that there could be, but no, it's just an accident. They just die.
Yeah, but it is a bit eerie though. Like, I mean,
oh sure, yeah,
pretty much just any time you show Pin, it sounds like, oh, what the hell is this thing?
Yeah, oh yeah. Like, I mean, I think the horror from this movie I would describe as just a constant feeling of unsettled. There's an unsettling vibe whenever Pin's there, and especially when Leon's like talking to Pin and someone else is uncomfortable about it. There's just oh yeah, that's really uneasiness that this movie comes from by and large. So. It's good stuff. So yeah, from this point we're into sort of the era of them being adults, or at least just out of high school at the very least. There's a whole segment here where the aunt's coming to live with them, and Leon doesn't want them to. It sounds like financially they're completely set because the dad had made a lot of money, so like they inherited the house, they inherited enough money to live off of, but you know, the aunt wants to come and live with them because they need, you know, especially for the sister. You know, she still needs an adult around. She's still you know, a minor. Blah blah blah. Leon doesn't want her there, and there's like a sense of freedom now that the parents are dead. They don't even seem that upset for long because quite quickly they're pulling off the plastic wrap that's on the couches because the mum was such a clean freak, and like, oh, we can actually sit on the couch for once in our lives.
And I think the big thing, you know, for Leon is that, oh, Pin gets to be in the house now. Like, he's just like right there. And honestly, I think that's like the big reason why he doesn't want the aunt around is like, yeah, you know, she's gonna freak out about Pin, which like I feel like that's kind of like another thing where I kept wondering, all right, is there gonna end up being something more to him? Just the way that, you know, they're so like, you know, like, oh, no one must find out about Pin, like no one will understand, like, you know, Pin, like, I feel like even if you don't, you know, want him to talk, like I feel like people would understand, like, oh yeah, your father was a doctor, he probably had, you know, dummies like this lying around, that's fine. But the way they make it seem is like, oh no, they'll like, you know, they'll I don't know, like put us away if they find out about him.
Yeah, I think that just shows that deep down he knows that this is wrong, but he's internalizing it as in all these ways to make it sound like, oh, everyone else just won't understand. But you know, because even the sister, when she sees Pin, is like, wait, why is he here? We don't need him at the house. And he's like, oh no, just let him stay here. Let him stay here. Like, you know, because whenever the sister says anything remotely, like she's suggesting that Pin not be around or that Pin's just a dummy, like Leon gets mad. Like Leon like snaps and he doesn't hit her again like he did when they were kids, but he'll like yell and say, "Oh, you're just against Penn, you're just a bitch," or something. Like he'll go off kilter very quickly whenever that subject gets challenged in any way. So I mean, I guess the first kill of the movie technically is the aunt, but it's kind of death by like scaring her to death, like basically making her have a heart attack, because we see she's taking pills for some sort of condition, and then he scares the shit out of her. But he clearly doesn't like that he has to hide Penn in the attic. He doesn't like that the aunt wants to put the plastic wrap back in the couches because she's not as bad as the mum, but certainly is similar enough that, oh, this is just like having mum again, and he does not want that. So we get this whole sequence where where you just see Penn come up like next to her in bed, and she starts freaking out, and then Penn's like moving towards her, and then she has a heart attack, and then it's right at the end of the scene where you see like Leon himself like sort of sit up from behind the bed, clearly showing that he was just holding Penn the entire time. And I think for me, this was where I knew beyond a doubt, okay, no, this is all just psychological. It's in his head. I think it was between this and the sister noticing the ventriloquism where I'm like, okay, I know what this is now. We're not trying to pretend that he's supernatural anymore, really, but yeah.
I feel like a lot of times with these movies, though, that'll be the intent, and then at the end they'll have like a last minute swerve where it's like, oh, you thought it wasn't real, but guess what? And then it will actually like, get up or start talking and do something. So, I mean, we'll get to the end, but
oh yeah,
I kept expecting like some twist, like, oh yeah, we're doing so much to make you think that it's all in his head, but then so it'll be like more of a surprise when you find out it isn't.
That's fair. I think though, if they'd pulled that twist at the end, I wouldn't have been mad, because it's a kind of schlocky thing that I think this movie could have gotten away with, and I'd have just been like, yeah, okay, fair enough. But I don't think it would have been justified from like everything they set up. You know, I feel like at this point it was pretty clear what was going on in terms of like the actual premise of the movie. But like it's a fun sequence. Obviously, it doesn't look suspicious because it is a heart attack. He never technically laid a finger on her or did anything like that. But it's like, hey, now it's just us. Now it's just brother and sister. Everything's fine. Except for the fact that the sister decided to get a part-time job in the library because she wanted to work. And you can tell how like possessive the brother is, like Leon, because as soon as she says, oh yeah, I think I'm going to start working in the library part-time, he's like, wait, why'd you have to do that? You don't need money. You're set. You don't need to work. I almost thought he was going to go into like a Parks and Recs character, just like like, oh, the library's for scum. Librarians are the most trash on earth. Why would you want to be there? But he doesn't quite do that. But this leads to kind of like what the back half of the movie, or back third of the movie, is about, which is that whilst there, a guy notices her, and at this point, I think we've jumped ahead in time, maybe a couple of years. I think he's like 22 and she's like 20 at this point by the time we're in the last chunk. But all they really do to give me that implication, to be honest, is her hair just kind of changes to be looking more mature. Like it's just like a more adult haircut, and that's just kind of all it takes. But this guy clearly likes her. His name's Stan. That's it. He clearly is wanting to flirt. She's receptive to it, and she kind of awkwardly brings up with Leon, hey, there's this guy, he's asked me out, or I don't even think he's asked her out yet. She just says, oh, I think he likes me. Do you remember this guy from school? And he's like, no, not really. But she's like, wait, you've not dated since the abortion. Do you really want to do that? And I think as much as there's times in this movie where he flies off the handle and just gets immediately paranoid and possessive, there's definitely times like this where I think he wants to, but he knows that it'll look bad, so he tries to like sort of be okay with it and be like, "Oh, you going to go out on a date with them? Are you okay with that?" Like you can tell he wants to say, "No, don't do it. I put my foot down," but he doesn't want to come across that way, so he's trying really desperately to just appear normal for a few minutes. That's what it feels like to me, anyway, in these scenes.
I could be wrong, but I felt like he said something like, do you think you'll have the need again, or something like that?
No, he says, do you ever get the need? And she says, yeah, sometimes. Which that's such an awkward thing to ask your sibling, like, hey, do you ever get horny? Oh dear. So yeah, I mean, from here, like that's kind of what the movie becomes about, where she does go on a date. It goes somewhat well, and there's kind of this like growing tension of like her getting closer to this guy, and they're hitting it off. They seem quite happy, and meanwhile, Leon is kind of like saying, "Hey, I'm not happy about this," but then he kind of tries to change his tune, and he's like, "Hey, if you're going to be with this guy, I should probably get to know him and like be friends with him. So maybe we should invite him over to the house." And I think the vibe I was getting at this point in the movie is that she is like terrified of like explaining to Stan who Pin is, because keep in mind
why.
there's been several scenes like during this sort of like adult part of the movie where she's like upset that Pin's around. In fact, I think there's a scene before this in this section where Leon has given Pin skin.
Oh right.
This is where this happens, where she comes home and he's like, "Hey, I've got something to show you with Pin," and he's put like, I don't know, like claymation or something. Like it's not claymation, just clay, I guess. Claymation is when you actually turn it into animation, but you know what I mean. Like he's put clay on him, and like he's got kind of a weird, like kind of like, I don't know, like
it's like an uncanny valley.
Yeah, yeah, it's creepy.
It strangely looks like worse when it has like hair and skin.
Yeah, and I'm like, where did you get hair from for a start? That's the question I have. But yeah, it's very disturbed, and she's like, you know, kind of concerned and whatever. But he's like trying to make the effort. He's like, "Hey, invite Stan over. You'll have to meet Pin." And she's like, "Oh, I don't know if he's ready to meet Pin." And he's like, "Well, if he's going to be in our lives, he's going to have to meet Pin eventually." And I'm like, oh, this is like a noose around her neck. Like this idea, like, oh, she's finally starting a life, she's met someone, and now Pin's there to explain. So
and I think to the movie's credit, like a lot of this stuff sounds like, you know, very crazy and over the top, but I think the characters all do like a good job of, I don't know, kind of like how people would react in this situation. And
well, I think I would say that Stan, like, because by the time he comes over for dinner, right, because she's obviously invited him, I was like, did she prep him? She better have, because if he walks in and is not expecting this, it's going to hit him like a truck. But clearly she has prepped him and explained before he got there, like, okay, this is the situation, this is what my brother thinks, blah, blah, blah. I have to say, I do think, like, the character gives it a solid go of like trying to be nice about it. Like I, honestly, like I didn't really feel it one way or the other about this character beforehand, but by the time we had these scenes where he goes in and says hello to Pin and tries to make conversation with Leon about Pin, I was like, you know what, this guy's a champ. He is putting in so much effort now to not like just like act like this is strange and weird, like it, and it really started to feel like, oh no, this is someone who is trying to talk to someone who has a mental health issue and is being, you know, sensitive about it, who's trying to approach it with some tact. And even when, obviously, when Leon hears them talking about him behind his back in a couple of minutes' time, it sounds bad to him, but I think to us, the audience, their conversation, like the sister and Stan, all they're saying is, hey, your brother's, I think, has mental health issues. I think he has to see a psychiatrist. Like, this is kind of like really, really bad. And the sister's like, oh no, he's not harming anyone, it's fine, like he can just stay here, write his poetry, and like, you know, have Pin in his life. And he's like, I don't know, like I think he might need help. But he never said anything degrading. He never calls him a name. He never says like, oh, your brother's a freak, or that he makes me uncomfortable. Right, yeah. He just always comes at it from the perspective, no, I think he needs help, like he needs some help here.
Yeah, I actually like the this character, and I think him and Ursula have like some good chemistry, and like, you know, I thought they had like a nice enough little meet cute. And then yeah, like you're saying, I feel like maybe the kind of like outrageous cheesy 80s movies that we're used to, we kind of expect the more over the top characters, especially like, you know, like the asshole boyfriend or jock guy, you know, but he really isn't like that. Like he is like, I don't know, I appreciate him being like understanding, and then even like, you know, putting up with Pin, and then and like the poetry and stuff. Like he's doing like a very realistic, like, okay, this is pretty disturbing, but I got to keep my cool. I got to be nice for my partner and stuff. And I think it came out pretty
he's
well.
a champ. Like I think a lot of people would like get a whiff of this and just break up with her. like I don't want to have to deal with any of this. I'm just going. He does his best. He makes it happen. And actually, something I'm thinking about now as we're talking about this is that, obviously her having as much sex as possible at 15, well, in the I mean, later on, she's definitely healthier in her attitude towards sex than her brother is. But I wouldn't say having as much sex as humanly possible with many partners as possible at 15 is that healthy either. It's definitely a bit, destructive in a lot of ways, and certainly rushing things that you're not really prepared for. But I think that's what makes this relationship with Stan stick out. It's like, okay, that was a bit of a misstep, and it led to like a pregnancy that needed to be dealt with. It was probably a little traumatizing. I think this stuff afterwards, though, with Stan is like, oh no, this is clearly like she's went through that, but she's sort of learned from it, and she's having a more healthy relationship. And I think this relationship with Stan really sticks out as being, no, she's actually having a good, solid, like partnership with someone that feels like a step forward. It feels like any like issues she had from what her parents put her through, she did like have some rough patch there in her teenage years, but she's kind of gotten through it, and she's having this more mature relationship with someone that seems like it's quite healthy. And I think that contrasts quite considerably. I think that's what makes it feel so nice, is that I think the stuff with her as a teenager, it felt like it was fitting into that crazy 80s movie vibe that you were mentioning. I think what gives the movie a little bit more depth in that is that when it gets to this part, it feels like it handles her and her new boyfriend more sensibly. Like, oh no, this isn't just doing crazy 80s stuff now. It's almost like the other characters around Leon have reached a mature level now where they're actually approaching it in a way that makes it feel just a bit more nuanced and tactful. And as a result, the movie, by the end, I don't think feels as just shock value. We're doing crazy stuff about a guy who's off his rocker. I think by the end, well, it's still going for some shock value here or there. I think the other characters actually give it a little bit more depth by this point, because she's grown up, she's matured a lot, she's having a healthy life, and her approach to her brother is sympathetic, even if she should make the choice to like have him see a psychiatrist. But like, I think everything her and her boyfriend say to each other all feels reasonable. None of it makes you dislike them and make you think, oh, the main character's an anti-hero, I can't wait till he kills them. Doesn't feel like that at all. It feels like, it feels better than that. So I guess it's surprising how well it handles not everything, but some of the elements that could just go into like, badly aged shock value shit, for the sake of it by the end. So, that's a sum.
Totally, yeah. It's not, again, I didn't know much going into the movie, but I was expecting something, a bit more like over the top weird or shocking. And I mean, I guess the movie is pretty weird and shocking, but I guess not in the way that I expected. I was expecting maybe a lot more cheesy and over the top. And it is kind of surprising that it's dealing with a very strange topic, but the characters are relatively like subdued or kind of like realistic about it. So that was a nice surprise. At
the very least, they become a lot more realistic about it by the end, and I think that the start of the movie ever made me think. We were sort of joking and comparing it to all these other slasher movies where a character sees sex at a young age and it messes them up, and it ends up being a little bit more thoughtful than that. Like, no, and I'm not saying it's completely thoughtful. I'm not saying it's a great study of the subject. Like, the ending's still a horror movie. It's still doing some like, hey, that isn't this creepy kind of thing at the end, but it has a bit more going than I would have expected. Of course, Leon is just miserable the entire dinner when Stan's over, but his sister encourages him to read one of his poems in front of Stan afterwards, because he's become quite the poet apparently over the course of the movie.
I think the sister, she had the right attitude when she was like, what should we do with Pin? Like, we should introduce people to Pin. Like, do we need this, in our lives or whatever? But she was way off the mark when she, was suggesting hearing his poems.
Well, I mean, I would like to think she didn't know that he was going to read this one, that she hadn't heard this specific one yet.
That's
because
fair.
this specific one is about sex, and specifically about raping one's sister, which is very concerning to hear from your brother, I think.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and Stan plays nice in front of him, but that's actually what kind of inspires the conversation about, hey, I think your brother needs help, right? Did you hear the poem? Did you hear the poem? It was a bit messed up, but we got some things to talk about here. Because this is the thing, is that Leon's talking to Penn and saying, hey, I think this guy actually likes my poetry. He's the first person that's liked my poetry outside of you and my sister. But then he goes downstairs and overhears this conversation, and it's like, oh no, I've been betrayed. I have to take care of him before, Penn's like, hey, you have to get rid of him before we lose her, before we lose Ursula. You have to get rid of him. So obviously that sets the next part of the movie in motion.
And to be fair, this was maybe like the first time I felt like, well, I mean, I guess like you feel bad for him as a kid or whatever, but I did strangely feel some like sympathy for Leon here, because it's like, yeah, I mean, that is like a big thing when you go out there and you introduce someone to your art, and then you get so excited when you think that they like it, and then to overhear all that stuff, oh, that is a bummer.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite good in that no one's the villain here necessarily, because like we said, the two characters talking about him are speaking with the best of intentions. They're not saying anything evil or mean just to be mean. They're saying like real things that need to be said because he does have a problem. But you kind of get it from Leon's perspective as well, that not only like is this a gut punch, but he feels this is feeding into his paranoia that people are out to get him, and that he's going to lose his sister, the one person he has. He's going to lose. And again, this idea that he was particularly protective of her, of any like man taking her away, that was like kind of like the rage when he beat up that guy in high school was pretty potent. So but Ursula's convinced he's not dangerous. Well, it doesn't take long to figure out that that's not entirely true, because then while she's at work, Leon calls Stan and says, hey, Ursula's birthday's in a couple of weeks. I want to throw her a surprise party. Do you want to help? And again, Stan, being a trooper, is like, yeah, sure, buddy. Yeah, I'll come and help. But do you want me to come over and talk about it? And he's like, yeah, come over right now. We can have a chat about it. And I'm like, he's putting in the effort. He even comes in and says hello to Penn when he arrives, when she's not there. And, to feed into everything that he's supposed to be doing. He's really putting in the effort. But of course, Leon drugs his drink, makes him all woozy, and then when Stan kind of realizes that he's been had a little bit, he tries to get away, and then Leon hits him over the head with like the little ballerina thing. Actually, I want to bring up something here. After the parents die, there's a scene with the brother and sister having like some pizza. They've ordered some pizza, and they're like, hey, we can be messy now. Also, we never have to cook again. And then in a bizarre turn of fate, he turns into like a really like enthusiastic chef, where he wants to make the dinners constantly. And one of the things that he keeps getting upset about is when his sister says, hey, I made plans with the boyfriend tonight. He's like, I took steaks out of the freezer. I've got a pot roast on like cooking right now. I've done dessert. And every time he's made dinner, the dessert's always like a full cake. He's always like baked a full cake. And I'm like, he's really getting into this. It's like he's really taking over the roles of both parents in a lot of ways. Like these, he's got a lot of both of them in him. But yeah, I just thought it was worth mentioning because they really stuck out. There's this like, you can pretend that you want to rebel against your parents, but then you become them anyway.
Kind
of thing. Yeah, he actually, for the first time in the movie, really, he directly kills someone. Well, seemingly anyway, because obviously it turns out at the end that Stan didn't die. Stan is in fact still alive, but hey, Leon's not a professional. Okay, he he didn't think to check for a pulse. He just hit him in the head a couple times and thought that was enough. But I love that the body bag that he puts him in is like a transparent plastic, like it's like, I think it's like for a suit or something like that, like for like a dry cleaner or something. But it's a really weird visual to see a body getting moved around in a clear plastic kind of sack. It's a hell of a visual.
And I felt like this scene, it was maybe like working like a little too hard to make like all these things come together. Like you have like we see the sister at work, and it's like her boss is like, oh, you don't seem like you're really into it today. Maybe you should go home early. And it's like, oh, maybe I should go home early.
Yeah, her boss was kind of weird. She was like, oh, you're singing a song. You must be really in love. Why don't you take the afternoon off after you've done this? It's okay with me. I root for young girls in love. And then what I thought was weird about that, though, is that the sister gets the day off. Her boss specifically says, I'm giving you the afternoon off because you're in love, which to me implies go and spend it with your boyfriend or something. And then the sister phones her brother after he's killed, seemingly the boyfriend, and says, hey, bro, I just got the afternoon off. Do you want to do something? I'm like, I don't think that's what your boss was getting at when she said that. If anything, it makes me like the sister more, because the sister's trying to make... No, it's like, oh, I don't want Leon to feel like he's losing me as a sister because I'm in a relationship. I want to make time for him. That's actually quite nice, right? Like, I mean, how many friendships struggle when one friend gets in a relationship and all of a sudden... It's especially when you're young. I feel like when young people get into relationships, they think that all their free time has to be spent with their partner and never with their friends, and it ends up ending friendships. Not even in a dramatic way, just in a way of well, they just stop spending time together because
sure. Yeah.
So no, she's making the effort. She's putting in the time to be there for her brother, and he's like, no, go and do some shopping or something. I'm going to be doing my poetry all day. I also need to dispose of a body. I mean, I never said that. Okay, I added that bit in. But he doesn't have time to completely dispose of it, so he just hides it in the log pile outside and moves his car somewhere else as well. But the thing that gives it away, though, when he sort of keeps feeding their stories about how Stan called and cancelled her date, so she's having dinner with him instead, and he's made her this big dinner. And he's like, oh, this is pot roast on Thursdays, just like Dad liked it. That was his favourite food. Interesting how he's very admiring of his father now that he's been gone for a while. It's funny how that's turned around. But she keeps being concerned and wants to call Stan, and she's not getting an answer. The thing that gives it away that something's happened is that she bought Stan a watch earlier in the movie that beeped on the hour, which I actually had a watch that used to do that. So yeah, fair enough. This is a real thing. It happens. But she hears the watch beep and she's like, why is this watch over here? And she's like, what happened? What did you do? What did you do, Leon? And Leon could have just said, oh, maybe he dropped it last night, when he was here for dinner. But of course, that's not what happens. Instead, quite quickly, he says, oh, he fell over and hit his head. He was dead before I could do anything. And she starts crying. It's a whole thing. And obviously Pin's sitting there throughout all of this, and this kind of shadow that's lingering over it. This all culminates in this big moment where she comes into the room with an axe and starts swinging it in slow motion. And I think it's meant to be ambiguous. Is she going to kill her brother for killing her boyfriend, or is she going to smash Pin? Now, I'll be honest, I was pretty confident she was just going to smash Pin. It just felt like the thing that it was going to do. And then it smash cuts to police being at the house, looking through the log pile. And then the policeman says, oh shit, he's still alive. And of course she starts getting really happy. Obviously he's turned out to be alive, and he goes to the hospital, blah, 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 blah. The end of the movie is that she is with Stan still. They're going on vacation, but she's driven back to the house, and she comes inside, and there's a nurse that's living here looking after her brother. And she goes into the bedroom, and she uses the name Pin. She says, hey, Pin, I'm just coming to see you. I'm going away with Stan for a week, and then we'll be back, and I'll come and see you again. And, this is obviously the same sort of scenario from the start of the movie, where whoever this is sitting at the window. This is what the opening was teasing. And the end of the movie reveals that Leon has become Pin, where Leon now has the blonde hair that Pin had. He's dressed like Pin. He's basically had a psychotic break where he now thinks he is Pin and just sits there. Aside from maybe saying go away to some kids who climb up at the window, as we saw at the start. But yeah, I mean, I like the ending. I thought it was a fun little bit.
Yeah, and again, good on Stan, because I'm assuming this would mean that he didn't press charges if Leon's not in jail, or
Not necessarily. I think, especially if like when she came out with the axe and smashed up the dummy, I assume that's when Leon had the psychotic break and became basically catatonic. I think in that situation he wouldn't go to jail. I think at that point, like the lawyers would be like, "Oh no, he's just like psychotic. He's practically, catatonic now. Like he just needs round the clock care. He doesn't need a prison per se."
I mean, I'm no law expert or anything, but I would assume that he would maybe have to be put in like a psychiatric
cell.
hospital or something. But I mean, not like I'm complaining or anything. Like it's a more effective ending to have it this way.
I mean, that's fair. I don't think he'd go to prison at the very least. You're right. He'd probably be in a more security filled hospital. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's been a year. Maybe like he's showing no signs of like doing anything. So it's like, okay, maybe just like a nurse that can keep an eye on him will do the trick. But that said, though, I mean, I don't think we see his hands. For all we know, his hands are like tied to the chair, like maybe just in case.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, and so I actually did have like a different read on the ending first.
Go on then, Timmy.
Well, no, like I agree with what you're saying, but for a second I kind of thought that maybe like she did like kill her brother, but now she's like crazy and talking to Pin, and she like dressed like Pin up to, because again we saw before like they had started putting like skin and like a wig and stuff on him, so I thought like maybe she was dressing Pin up to look like her brother, and she was now talking to him or something.
So this what did you think the nurse that was living there to look after him thought?
I wasn't thinking about it like too hard. It was just like a thought I had at first, and then I was like, oh okay, oh no, I understand. But yeah, that was like something that was, maybe I was like trying to think too hard, like that the movie was gonna have some type of swerve or something. But yeah, I thought that was funny.
Yeah, it plays it surprisingly straight at the end once you like get to the point where you understand everything that's going on. I mean, the movie ultimately is about, these parents, specifically the father, kind of like creating this character for his kids out of this medical dummy / mannequin, and because they're so cold towards their kids, their son latched onto the mannequin as like a more of a father figure, as more of a depending friend that he can count on. And yeah, just kind of how messed up that kind of led to things down the line, the sexual repression, the feelings towards his sister. There's a line earlier on, I think when they're like, maybe they've aged up a bit, but not all the way, where the sister mentions, oh yeah, dad used to like, give me a question before bed, and he would say, well done, and kiss me, regardless if I got it right or wrong. But in the opening scenes, when he did that with the two of them, she did get it right, and then Leon didn't. He didn't just say, oh, well done anyway, and kiss him and say good night. He said, oh, you got it wrong. Like, work on it for tomorrow. You didn't do good enough. So I do also wonder if like she got favoritism as well, and that's also kind of like added to messing him up specifically. So, but yeah. It's an interesting movie. The performances are entertaining, maybe not always like down to earth. Like David Hewlett, like I said, he's entertaining, he's good to an extent, but there's definitely times when he's like overdoing it. There's definitely times when he's going into a little bit of the like overly shouty and yelly and like I'm crazy kind of thing. I think it's very much worth watching. It's just weird enough, but at the same time has just enough like actual human character drama, like especially in the second half, where you're like, okay, you know what, this actually worked together better than I think it had any right to.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty surprised. Like it's it definitely wasn't what I was expecting, but it not in a bad way though. Like I enjoyed watching it. It's it was surprising that it kept my attention. There was like some like I do think they do a good job of like building up tension, with Leon's character, because I mean most of the movie is just waiting for him to explode. Like something's gonna happen and it's not gonna be good. And then yeah, like Pin was like, you know, it had like a creepy visual and a creepy voice to it. So like they don't go to it like too much, which is, you know, fine. But when they did, it was like kind of disturbing and unsettling. And yeah, there's just this kind of like layer of like sleaze and repression and like stuff that just feels taboo that yeah, it makes it for a pretty interesting watch. I definitely recommend it if it's, you know, something people have like heard of, or yeah, I've listened to this review. If it sounds intriguing, yeah, I think there's definitely other movies that would have handled this like, you know, a bit more boring or something, but I thought this was a pretty decent watch.
Yeah, and it's taboo and sleazy from the perspective of the person who's repressed, which is interesting. In fact, actually, without even mention, there's a scene after the sister starts dating Stan. And the brother tries to kind of like, oh, I guess I should do that too, to be like equal to her and like sort of like prove that I can also be normal. He ends up on a date with a girl who, what was her name? Marcia, I think her name is. Or is it Marcia? Marcia, whatever. Anyway,
Marcia is, yeah, probably.
But it's it, you know, it cuts to like the cinema, right? And like he's watching the movie and she's just like licking his ear and like trying to kiss the side of his face. And I was like, how did this date even happen? Like how, like given how he is, like how did this come to be? And they end up back at the house and she's like, you know, putting the moves on, she starts undressing and she's like, hey, take your shirt off, let's do this. And he immediately starts saying, oh, I don't know, like Pin's like a family friend who's in the house. He might show up. And she's like, oh, just, you know, put a chair under the door. Like, it's fine. Do you want to have sex or not? And he's like, yeah, I do. And then he just can't. He keeps just thinking about Pin and he keeps bringing up Pin. So it definitely shows that he has issues of like even going into that kind of thing. And she says, oh yeah, my brother knew who you were and made fun of me for coming over here and you're just proving him right. I defended you. And like, you know, someone is basically like offering him the experience on a platter and he just can't like, you know, accept it. He can't reach out and connect with someone. So that's I wanted to go back and mention that because that does seem actually quite important in the context of like just how much he is just disconnected from that part of himself. It goes back to that question, does he have the need? No, I'm not old enough. Well, it turns out even when he was old enough, he doesn't really have the need either. Which, yeah.
Well, I guess it's a question of like, yeah, does he not have it, or is he just so repressed that he's just fighting it and it's just manifesting in these unhealthy ways? You know? Yeah,
it's like instead of like getting horny, he just wants to talk to Pin. Like that's like what happens instead. Yeah.
And then it's interesting because I'm not sure what he's gonna end up doing with that girl, but she's basically saved by the sister. Like when she comes home, and then she like has to like comfort her.
It seems like he might have been about to kill her when she was getting scared and like running away from him, and then just because the sister came home, it kind of diffused the tension. And there was one really weird thing. I don't know if you caught this. So I think it's when they were at, I think it was just them at the movies, right? I don't think we saw a date with the sister at the movies or anything. No. Oh, by the way, the movie that they were watching at the cinema, just to mention, it was Scanners, which...
Oh, was it?
Which, funnily enough, also Canadian.
Canadian, yeah. But no, there's one thing that caught my eye, because I think I wasn't sure what the girl was eating at the movies, but like she takes out like a fork, and I don't know, it just seemed very strange to me.
No, this was the sister. That's because the sister and the boyfriend on their first date, they're at the restaurant, and like she's eating with chopsticks, or no, he's eating with chopsticks, and he says like, hey, do you want to try the chopsticks to see if you can use them? And she's like, oh no, that'll be too messy. I think that was like a callback to like how much her mum like drilled into her like how much she hates mess. So like there has to be a fork because chopsticks are just get food everywhere. And then they realize they're going to be late for the movie, so they go to the movie, and I think what they're saying is that they got it to go.
Oh, okay.
And they're literally eating the dinner from the restaurant out of like boxes, and that's why she has a fork.
That makes sense.
Right? Yeah. There was set up for it. Yeah. Also, which reminds me, earlier on you said you didn't know why he was named Pin.
Yeah.
It turns out, and this was something that Stan brings up because he said, "Oh, she told me all this." She called him Pinocchio, and it became Pin for short.
Oh, okay. Oh, that makes a lot of sense then.
Yeah.
I must have missed that.
Yeah, but he became Pin because he never lied. I think the lore of the family.
Oh, okay, yeah. I think I think at some point they mentioned something about lying. Like he literally says like we can't lie. Like it.
Yeah.
We're not able to.
So. Yeah,
Okay,
a couple interesting little scenes to go back and mention there. Yeah. All right, Tim. I think we can round this up. What was your scene of the movie?
I don't know if it's gonna make me sound like a little freak, but I might go with the nurse scene.
Yeah, I knew you were gonna say it. You sick bastard.
It's just like so out of nowhere and not what I was expecting, and it just puts you in such like a funny place where you're like, oh, okay, so this movie is gonna go places. It's not just gonna be like, oh, okay, like I don't know. It's just I don't know. It was so out there, and I don't know, like I don't know if it really has that much to do with the rest of the movie. Like I guess there's so much about repression and stuff, but I feel you could still gotten the point across without that scene. But I don't know. It's very funny to me.
No, I mean I think it fits. I think it's important to see what his first encounter with sex is and whatnot. I mean I'm tempted to even pick that as well because it is the scene that sort of jumps out as, oh shit, this movie's going to be weird. All right, let's do it. If I was to pick anything else, I don't even know what I would go with. So yeah, I think I'm going to go with the nurse scene too. Yeah. All right, there you go. MVP of the movie, Tim.
I think it would be easy to go with Leon because I mean, it's so much of the movie revolves around him, and like we said, maybe there are times where he's chewing the scenery a little bit, but I still think that he's always like an interesting character and where he's coming from, but I don't know. I think I might actually give it up to Ursula. I think like I don't know, she's kind of like the heart of the movie, and I think it's interesting to see things like from her perspective and how like all this stuff she's going through, and like essentially she's had similar upbringing to him. Like you said, maybe the dad was a little bit more lenient on her, but still like she went through a lot of these same things and lived with these parents, but still came out of it like I don't know, like it seems like a much more positive person, and I don't know, I like that she found like a new love, and again that she seems like a well-rounded person. Like we said, like for a while you think they might just make her a caricature of like this sex crazy girl or whatever, but I actually thought they did a good job of like expanding her character and stuff.
Like I'm not sure how intentional that was to make me think if she was going to be more two-dimensional and just like the slutty one, but the fact that she ended up being a fleshed out character who ends up in many ways being the sympathetic, like, I mean, you said heart of the movie. It feels weird to say protagonist per se, but I actually think there's an argument to say that both her and Leon are the main characters. Like they're kind of almost equal, to be honest, at a certain point. And that's I think a lot of the tension of the movie is like, is this going to end with him finally killing her because he can't have her exactly the way he wants her to be? Or is she going to like, be able to like deal with them? And I think the ending being what it is, I like that it is more about sort of like her accepting that he has a problem. That's ultimately the arc of the movie for her, is accepting that he does need help, that he can't just be normal, and just sort of like we can't just ignore that he's got these issues. Which like the message that we can't just ignore mental health problems is a good one, even if it is a bit it's weird or silly at points and fantastical with how it portrays some of the things. So there is like some underlying good qualities to this movie and its story, even if it's not always completely on the up and up in that sense. So, I guess I'm saying Ursula as well. Like I think there's an argument for Leon, of course, because he is such a big part of the movie. He is very compelling. Terry O'Quinn's obviously fun to have around, and I think there's even an argument for Stan. because Stan ends up being such a stand-up guy. Stand-up Stan, we call him.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say for Pin for a second.
Oh no.
Which I mean, honestly, I wouldn't put it past someone.
I mean, Pin's not a character. Pin's a state of mind.
I might argue that.
It is interesting though that this effectively
you can't have sex with a state of mind.
Okay, a wooden state of mind. I do think it's interesting that this essentially boils down to like a sort of Scarface, like the ventriloquist kind of like relationship, right?
Sure,
yeah. It's kind of what it is, or any like horror story where like a ventriloquist has got a dummy and like starts like talking to the dummy like it's a real person. Like it's kind of that type of story, but just presented through this lifelong kind of thing and not just something that develops later on. So, all right, Tim, what you rating Pin?
This one actually is a little bit of a tough rating. Because I would say overall I enjoyed it. I don't think it's like maybe outstanding, like, oh my god, I love it. But yeah, like I definitely didn't hate it. It was surprisingly, I never really found it to be boring. And it wasn't. I was expecting it again to be maybe more of like a good in like a cheesy over the top way, but it's not really. But I don't know if I can say it was like good enough to go super high, but I think I'm thinking about a 6.5. I think it's pretty enjoyable. It was a nice easy watch. I think maybe some of the things that bring it down is like we mentioned some stuff that maybe doesn't stand out that well, like music and again I was watching kind of a crappy version, so maybe it's unfair to say, but it's not like the cinematography was like that interesting or whatever. I mean, I guess there were some like interesting parts, like when he's manipulating Pin and stuff, but maybe like it didn't overly like look great or whatever. So I don't know if that sounds too harsh, but I still enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty good watch, and I would recommend people check it out if it sounds interesting.
Yeah, I think I'm going a bit higher than you are. I don't think it quite hits great. Maybe on rewatches I would change my mind on that, but I think it's good. So I was even tempted to go to 0.5, but I think I'll just say 7. I'll be conservative, but I do think it's a good movie. I think it skirts the line of almost being on kind of like weird and silly and tipping into that realm, but actually is surprisingly got some decent character progression and relationships and things to say. It's it's got some nice creepy vibes whenever Pin's involved, and kind of the build to things erupting is pretty good. I think if nothing else, I would really compliment how whether they wrote the script like this or they just did a really good job when they were editing stuff and just cut scenes out, but it does a really good job of not belaboring like parts of the movie that could have been stretched out for like more drama. They kind of did a good job of like setting something up and then cutting to a scene that followed on from it that was interesting and took it further, rather than just like I said, there's entire sections where I could have seen things being drawn out. The one I brought up earlier was when she found out she was pregnant and didn't want to tell her dad. That could have been agonizing over it for several scenes of like trying to bring it up and not being able to. No, it cut straight to a scene with her and the brother going to see Pin to ask for help, which then cut straight to a scene pretty much where they're with the dad and he knows about it. It happily skips over things that it doesn't feel like it has to explain. Just like Stan, like knowing about Pin when he arrives at the house. We didn't get a scene of her sitting down and explaining it, which I think a lot of movies or a lot of people making this movie would have done that scene. They'd have been like, hey, we're going to have this scene where she tries to tell Stan this and he has to be like, wait, what? Really? And instead, no, it's actually more interesting because we just get him coming in and we learned through the way that he talks to Leon and then talks to Penny even that, oh, she's clearly explained this. And like, you get this rush of both, oh, he knows all this now, she's told him this, but also he's trying his best to play along because it's the right thing to do in the context. And it makes you like him a bit more, and it keeps it compelling because you're not having to explain bit by bit. You get kind of a rush of like both like the reaction to it and also like how he's going to handle it at the same time. We don't have to deal with the initial shock of it. We can just get him now that he's had some time to process it, which makes it inherently a bit more interesting. Because, you know, obviously the shock value of it is good as well, but we've already done that earlier in the movie, right? We've already had the sister act shocked with how he is with Pin. We don't need to do it again. So I think there's actually some really smart choices made throughout. So I'm going to say it's good and say it's a 7 out of 10. I would recommend it if you want kind of an interesting gem from the 80s, something a little bit different. Pin, everyone. So now that we've put a pin in this review, I'll tell you about some things. Patreon specifically, you can support the show and help keep Screams After Midnight coming, along with all the other shows we do on Mail Fuzz Movies, like the Sci-Fi Podcast, the Atomic Cinema Experiment, or the Collector's Cut. You can support all those shows over at Patreon and get bonuses. There's bonus shows with me and David, but of course, more relevant to you for this show is that every month, me and Tim do an exclusive show just for Patreon and YouTube members. This is also an option if you want to do YouTube membership instead. And that episode is just for them. Plus, we do even more streams, which is kind of like a discussion segment of some kind once or twice a month, where we'll do like a top 5, a top 10, or we'll play kind of a horror theme game or something like that, like a discussion based game to be specific. So, you know, if you want to support the show and get some extra content, you can do that over at patreon.com/mailfuzztv. And plus, there's always extra bonuses in October, so there's actually 3 bonus episodes this month as opposed to the usual one, which is usually in the off week each month. But yeah, so there you go. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications. All that stuff does help out a bunch. I won't tell you what's coming next just in case things get moved around, but this should be hitting the halfway point of the Octoberthon, give or take. But hopefully you're having fun and looking forward to all the rest of the movies. But that is us. So any final thoughts, Tim, before I say goodbye?
Support your local Canadian government, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, it's only the local Canadian government if you're in Canada, Tim.
Well, it still needs our support, damn it. They're
okay, sure.
They're doing quality work over there in the horror realm.
Yes. The exploitation subgenre is alive and well.
Yeah, I could have used a few more sorries in the movie, but otherwise.
Well, that's the thing. I don't even know if it's meant to be set in Canada. I feel like a lot of Canadian movies just play it close to the chest. It's like, this could be America if you don't recognize the accents. So,
that's true.
And plus, Terry quite obviously is the dad, so it's not like he sticks out as being Canadian. So
that's right.
Anywho. That'll have to be a top 5 we do even more screams at some point. It's top 5 Canadian movies.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone, and we always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and we will see you next time.